Yeah. Well, I avoid editing at all costs these days. It sounds worse than it is. I got so stuck into editing at one stage, and it just takes up so much time. And I love it. I absolutely love it, but I do not have that much time. So
I'm the same.
Is that a Welsh jersey?
It is, yes. The costume change is just I didn't want to be in uniform, so and then we can't actually talk about like the work specific stuff, so no mention of where I actually work, just in case you don't edit this. But
okay.
yes, this is the shirt I packed to play volleyball tonight. So
awesome. So the super secret place that you work.
I mean, it's just don't have to say my name. If anyone looks me up, then it's fine. But yeah, I'm not in an official capacity. That's the point.
Yes, yeah, I get it. Well, I suppose. Hey, how you going?
Yes, the logical place to start is greeting. I feel like it's a very accurate representation of our relationship. Right?
Indeed. Yeah. So thanks for doing this. Really do appreciate it. Yeah, I'm looking forward to. I've got like a ton of things to ask you. Like, nah, not that many. Just a few questions, but I think one of the things I wanted to do initially, I was going to ask a few kind of not blindsided questions. I know I sort of indicated that might be the case, but hang on, is this showing? Okay, wonder how it's recording.
No, it says it's recording at the top.
Yeah. Okay. Anyway, we'll edit that out, and that'll stay in anyway. So. Yes. Yeah. So I suppose one of the main things, I get asked a lot of questions where I'm now confident in my response to them, as in like, mate, I'm now confident in my emotional response to them. Like, I don't feel the need to sort of go, get my hackles up and go, I've got to kind of argue with that, because I've kind of got to a point where I've wrestled with some of these and then come to my own conclusions. But someone asked me some good questions the other day, and they were like academic related, and I was like, okay, well, I haven't got that skill. So it was I haven't got that. I'm not from that world, so I thought it'd be really cool to pass some of those by you. And also, one of the biggest things is, and I know you help coaches in general, but one of the biggest things is like there are people out there that are starting to do CLA for grappling and jiu-jitsu and martial arts and that sort of thing. And there's, I suppose, there's a ton of information out there, but like, where do they start? So what I'd like you to do is introduce yourself and where you come from, your background, and then we'll get into some questions.
Yeah, no, happy to start there. My name is Alex Lascu. If you want to pronounce it not like the Aussies do, it's technically supposed to be Lascu, but I'll take any version of that. I have garnered the nickname of Ted because everyone got sick of trying to say Lascu, so they just stopped at Lasso and then went on from there. And I'll take that as a compliment because I'd like to think that's the kind of coach and coach developer I am. So my background is born and raised in Brisbane. I've played pretty much every sport you can think of. My goal is to get to 50 sports played. I'm currently at 39. I do have a list if anybody wants to check those facts. And the inspiration behind that, which I think feeds a lot of what I do, even just for work, but in general, is I never wanted to be unable to join in. I wanted to be able to join in with the world in any way, shape, or form, any sport, any time, anywhere. And it's such a privilege to be physically literate, to never balk at someone giving you a tennis racket or asking you to throw a ball or to play catch with somebody. I love being able to join in on those moments. So I've essentially trained myself up to do that. When people ask which one's my favorite, you have the cult answer, which is I played cricket for 20 years. And then you have like these moments of sport that nothing else can really bring, the points of connection, the ways that you can move your body in weird and wonderful solutions to problems. So that has pretty much fed everything that I do. On paper, I have a dual bachelor's in sports science and psych. I have a PhD in sport and exercise, specifically on talent development and skill acquisition in women's cricket. Not a single person ever really starts the conversation there, so it kind of just hides in the back drawer somewhere. I'm sure mum and dad have it somewhere, and collecting dust next to my preschool hand-drawn images. But I feel like those things are inconsequential almost. They are a very deep part of who I am, but they're not really the things that you see when you have a conversation with me. So, when people ask to introduce myself, I'm like, oh, I have these things on paper, but actually I just really love that people love moving their bodies. So I kind of facilitate that as a living.
Yeah, cool. At a super secret facility.
Yes, we're gonna work with Olympic and Paralympic coaches. So like I've spent most of my time in community sport. I think that's where the magic happens. I think that's where the real world is almost. We often will have access to some version of sport in our communities. So if you have a positive experience there, you can have a lifetime of loving movement. And then you have the almost, I would say, opposite end, but the deeper end of that, which ends up being sort of your high performance sports spaces, where I've spent a bit of my time over the last year and a bit and over the years. And I find the joy in both of them comes from very different things, but there's joy in it regardless.
Yeah, cool. And recently you've written a section in now I've bought it. You didn't send me through the thing, but that's all right. That's all right. So, Ecological Dynamics in Sports Coaching, the Essential Guide. So you have provided a chapter on cricket. Tell us a little, and tell us a little bit about that and how that came about.
Yeah, so I stumbled upon the world of ecological dynamics and skill acquisition. I was lucky enough, and he was unlucky enough to have me as a student, but Ian Renshaw was one of my early professors in my undergraduate degree. And the second we started talking about alternative ways of explaining motor control, I was hooked immediately. It was like I finally found the words for the things I'd been questioning my whole life as an athlete, often to the point of getting myself in trouble with coaches because they maybe couldn't explain why they were doing things, and that's all I wanted to know. I was just going to help me. How will I get better? Why are we doing this drill? Every coach that's ever had me probably can still hear me asking those questions. And ironically, I now ask other coaches that question. But I distinctly remember the lecture that just hit me like a ton of bricks. And of course, most of Ian Renshaw's work has also been in cricket, with his son now playing at the fringes of the international level within Australia. And they asked me to do this chapter, not him. Yes. So I finally, it's a very silly way to describe it, but it is one of those moments that you're like, wow, the person who essentially started me on my path and inspired a lot of the work in this space and has done an incredible amount of work and continues to, I get to be the next person, the person that comes after, the person that continues on with at least some of that legacy. So yeah, to get an email from the editor and be like, hey, we want you to write this chapter when there are a handful of people in the world who could, is a pretty cool moment, especially as an author. So yeah, that email was pretty special. And just the process of writing it about a thing I know inside and out it's got to be one of the best feelings in the world to explain something that you love in a context that you love for people who will hopefully pick it up because they already love that space. It's a really nice way to bring in, just the random stuff I know into one place.
Yeah, that's so cool. I just had that thought of the student has become the master.
Never, but it is my one point of contention. It's like, well, they asked me.
Did Ian write any more in that book? No.
I don't think so. No, I think he's very practical at the moment. So the man probably has way too many books that he's contributed to and written, and was in the process of actually doing one around like the combination of ecological dynamics and motivational interviewing, specifically in cricket. So that was happening at the same time. So there are some really awesome resources that now exist, trying to get people to feel like they are closer to theoretical concepts. They're not just these like nebulous things that coaches are not allowed to know because you don't have an academic background. Our job is to actually translate that information effectively. So yeah, we're trying all these different ways to bring people closer to the things they want to know.
Yeah, that's cool. One of the questions I was going to ask, but you've actually tweaked it a little bit there. So how would you explain the question I was going to ask? How would you explain ecological dynamics to a white belt? But let's flip that on its head. And how would you explain ecological dynamics to a fairly set in their ways black belt who is thinking, well, I don't know anything about this and I don't want to try.
Yeah, I think the place that I often start is like, how do you think you learned to get to where you are? Because if we can understand that belief of what you think you've been through to get to this point, then we can understand the steps along the way that might have opened up an alternative path. So the idea that you can sit there and make shapes is probably the best way that I can describe it, to form the ways of moving without interacting with something else, or then gradually interacting with things bit by bit in a linear sort of progression towards this end goal that is predetermined or right or wrong, and the constraints of that are very tight. Then I can then help open up what that space can look like. So if I wanted to explain nonlinear pedagogy, I would say, well, actually the times that you end up training for different things in a week is still nonlinear, right? Like you think you're progressing linearly towards something, maybe within a session, maybe on a Monday night, you did one thing. But the fact that you did a slightly different thing on Wednesday, a slightly different thing on Friday, maybe a Thursday morning looks entirely different. There is still like non-linear steps along the way. It's never just wholly centered on one particular thing. And then it begins to like soften the boundaries, I guess, of what is acceptable and what is possible to get to where you are. So ecological dynamics allowed me to understand the human body as a complex adaptive system. We're not treating it as individual parts that need to be put back together or told what to do. Again, most theories don't believe that, but that's kind of like how it's been misconstrued over the years. But if I believe that we're complex and we adapt to what we're interacting with, then the way that I change how I move is by changing what I interact with. Not necessarily telling the body what to do or what shapes to make or when to make them and how, but giving it a reason to make those, like to get into those positions in the first place. So it kind of flips what I focus on as a coach, what I would expect athletes to do. And then of course, the next step above that is how I actually have those conversations with coaches. But for the most part, like especially the conversation around like the ecological part of ecological dynamics, I'm talking about how we perceive the world. Like, do we need to actually process it before we can use it? Or is that happening so quickly that we can't really say at this point cognition is happening? It's happening all of the time in different ways at different depths, but it's consistently there. I'm not stopping to think about it before I act. I'm not really distinctly making decisions along the way, because it's really hard to say when that starts and stops. So what if it never does? What if it is constant and ongoing and emergent anyway? What if everything that we perceive is directly available to us to use and vice versa, rather than having these distinct steps along the way that are very, very difficult to quantify in more complex sports, but also really simple ones like tennis. Simple sports. I don't think there's a simple sport in the world. And I'm so sorry, tennis, for using you as an example. But like the timelines of when things happen feel really discrete. You have the ball, I have the ball, you have the ball. So much is still happening within that. And then you look at the complexity of people moving together to then get other people in positions that hurt them, like martial arts, like the constant interaction with another person quite physically, not just manipulating them by using space and time and a racket. Then it becomes even harder to know, when does the decision happen? Well, the thinking about it, the decision is constantly happening, which means we would train for it in very different ways, if I believe that. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, definitely.
I'm jumping between them.
No, that's yeah, far out. I was sort of got a bit lost in the ecological dynamics side, like, because I've done a whole heap of reading on it, and a lot of people don't sort of see that ecological side, like that. Like there is not that cognition aspect necessarily needed, which kind of brings me to that question that I was asking before, or that I was mentioning before. So someone said to us that there's a lot more evidence, in inverted commas, for a lot more history of evidence for the IP ideas, right? And so this was the academic part where I was like, well, I don't actually know, like ecological dynamics to me is correct, it's right, but
Come on.
well, I mean, like, I did take a step back, I did take a step back, and I'm not super militant with it, but it, as a theory, it's informed how I operate within the world, how I operate my coaching, all that kind of thing. But I suppose the question is, what is the validity of the theory? At what level is it within academia at the moment, versus the other? So it feels as though it's kind of maybe a bit of a fringe that has more evidence, in my opinion, but again, not an academic, that has more real world application and the like, and previous IP models. So I suppose my question, and what I'm going to be taking back to this particular person, would be, well, actually, yeah, it is. Go. Is that a good enough question?
Hospital pass and a half already. No, I think I would say, firstly, cognition does happen. The difference is when it happens in the chain. So we would say in the ecological space is that it's embodied and embedded and ongoing, whereas like it is a distinct process that can be seen before and after in other spaces. So like that's kind of where the fork in the road is. It's still happening. There is cognition every time. By the fact that we exist, there's going to be cognition. But how we actually look at it at a theoretical level is like a distinct process that can happen in the middle of like a structure. So like, perceive information, make a decision, then act on it, or like input, stimulus, output, movement. Whereas like the ongoing and embedded version of it is the same equivalent, I would say, within the ecological psychology space. In terms of the evidence bases, I would say that most of the practical applications of like the more cognitive and information processing sides of it have not actually stayed faithful to what the cognitive side was talking about in the first place. The practical versions of it will kind of often pick and choose different things and then run with them rather than keeping them connected. And one of the hardest parts about applying a theory is that every decision, every assumption that's made along the way is made with a very specific intention. I believe the world works like this, so I believe knowledge is this, so learners learn like this, therefore I behave like this. That is the chain that we work with for every single theory. And you can argue that the chain is still evolving in the more ecological dynamics side. We are testing the barriers and the extent of how and when it works. And then the cognitive psychology side has been around for longer because it evolved first. It is we are a real science version of psychology. It was trying to convince the physical hard sciences that maybe putting everything into words and numbers isn't just the way of knowing. Maybe we are a part of knowing too, and there are processes that we can find to explain how we do things, why we know things, etc. So the cognitive space will then spend a lot of time identifying the differences or the distance between people and their environments. So that distance is maintained by the way it's studied. So the person can be changed, and therefore how they interact with their environment can be changed. The difference on the ecological side is that constant mutual relationship between a person and their environment. There is no distance between them because everything that exists in the environment shapes what I do and vice versa. Who I am, how I think, what I do will then change how I interact with my environment. And so the evidence bases that we'll see on either side are built on assumptions like those. So the depth of one side is purely because we've spent more time with it. And there are some really, really intelligent ways of using the information that I don't think the practical side of research has caught up with yet. And then, of course, there's so many good practices of good coaching that we will never, ever see in research. And that is such a shame because it is very hard to capture the complexities of what a good coach does, what good coaching can be. So while I think there's a world that we will never know in the research, the depth of what the cognitive psychology side contributes to coaching, I think is underutilized in terms of how beneficial it can be if you maintain that chain. Now, the ecological side, so ecological dynamics evolved from these key distinctions that were made along the way. What if it's not person and environment as separate? What if the person and environment are constantly interacting? So that's kind of like the first fork in the road. The next is, what if the human body is actually connected deeply at all times? Every system, every articulation that we can do is actually part of an ongoing system that is learning to adapt and then reshape how it moves at all times. So that's kind of like the second fork in the road of how we view the human body. If our bodies interact with the world in different ways, then we need a new evidence base to test that theory. And the practical side of it became more, I don't know, more tangible, I guess, because it was very easy to question a lot of what the cognitive science had then transferred into coaching. It kind of bled into it more so than being genuinely tested in the coaching space. From what I know of the space, I am trained in cognitive psychology at an undergrad level. And so all of my ecological knowledge is purely based on my PhD and the curiosity that sustains me. But building a practical evidence base is again going to be incredibly difficult, because how can we ever stop and say, oh, that change happened because of ecological dynamics? Like, in the same way that it'd be very hard to say, oh, you made that decision because of this stimulus, this input. Well, if we want to be able to say that, then we would have to violate what the real world really is. So then we create a distance between what a theory is telling us and how it looks in practice. We had the benefit of coming a bit later, or at least the evolution of what ecological dynamics is, as it is now shifting towards that more practical side, because we already know that distance between theory and practice is made up. So how do we never create it in the first place? Is kind of we've benefited from other people. I wouldn't even say making that mistake, being victim of it is probably a better version of it. They never intended it for it to be a gap, but we've created those gaps ourselves. So I wouldn't say one evidence base is stronger than the other. They exist for different reasons. I would say ecological dynamics is evolving live in front of our eyes, because it hasn't spent as much time being questioned and poked and prodded. But the cognitive sciences have a depth that we may never get to. It's just whether or not that depth is helpful and useful in coaching practice. We're still grappling with that, not through no fault of their theories, probably just through our fault of how we apply them.
Yeah, okay. I suppose historically, I suppose over that time, there hasn't been a whole heap of sophistication in the methods, and those methods have been improving over the decades as well. So
we're asking dead questions. We're probably getting different answers now, and we're more comfortable with evolving theories to say, okay, maybe settling on that wasn't the best idea. How about we take that idea from the 70s and actually reinvestigate it in hopefully more intelligent ways, or at least more thoughtful ways.
Mm. Do you have much to do with kind of neurobiology, neuroscience in this field?
Somewhat. So actually one of the courses that we do at the end of our psychology degrees is in neuropsychology. So that was my backup career plan, essentially, until I realized that there was a whole different psychology out there, but I'm somewhat familiar with it.
Yeah, okay, cool. Yeah, so when I did my chat with Keith Davids and David Farrock, David was doing his doctorate and had his thesis, I believe, on flow states.
Mm-hmm.
And like I was super interested in it, and like I started asking all these kind of questions about, you know, what I thought we'd be able to monitor, and I was like, oh, are you going to be doing like endorphin levels and all this kind of thing? And he was just like, no, we're doing self-reporting, and I was like, oh, okay, yeah, maybe, you know, in my head, there's a lab, you've got like the thing on the head, you're extracting, and I'm just like, yeah, I really don't know that side of how we're getting to anything. So it just interests me though, because I'm sure that there's something there, but as soon as you start poking and prodding, you're just completely removing the representativeness of the environment. So
especially like if you think about just those head caps alone, right? So
yeah,
if we take like a
yeah.
functional MRI, you are not allowed to breathe, you're not allowed to move, you don't even allowed to think about moving. Like, can you imagine just, and I have seen, like, especially in some, like, you know, markets, people will like say that you can just put this cap on and it measures your brain waves. It can't. Okay, it cannot. They are lying to your face if you think you can run around a football field untethered and be like, these are your brain leads. No. I don't know what this bit now, bro, but it is not a functional MRI. Like,
what's that thing? The scientific principle of like, if it gets observed, it changes. What's the
yeah,
you know?
yeah.
And I know that that's true, because as soon as Levi comes in with his camera, I'm like, okay, all right. Like I think I've only sort of recently just not given a shit about it, but that's when I start turning to it and going like, yo, capture that, you know.
Like, I didn't even like, object impermanence is a brilliant thing, because the second we start doing something, I literally forget it exists.
Oh, geez. So I've got, let me, oh yeah, this is a good one. So I suppose from a more of a practical, I might move to more of the practical, unless you've got anything that, because I mean, I'm still super interested in it, but I think people will also want the practical, and I'm here to give the people what they want. No, I also want to know a few things. So representativeness. So I've got there's obviously a scale, right? So Rob Gray talks about, you know, he'll bring balls to practice that are all different sizes, that are not the size of the ball that they're going to play with. And I've had a number of times where, you know, in class, and it's come up again. One of have you met Jamie, Purple Belt Jamie? So
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, so Jamie's spoken about, he's seen all these games online, and he's like, I really want to bring them into class. And I'm like, man, go for it. You know, like, from my perspective, I want you to experiment and test stuff out. And then he showed me the games, and it's like, oh God, no, they're not representative at all. You know, like,
I didn't know that.
well, and then it came back to that discussion we've had before, where I was like, at what stage is what's the scale of representative, you know? And I know that Adam Singer and Scott Seabright, do you know those two
I know the names.
Yeah. So they've got their Learning to Fight podcast, and I recently put a fairly big comment on one of their YouTube videos, and Adam was kind enough, I haven't responded like an asshole, but Adam was kind enough to actually give me a really well thought out response. I'm still not sure quite if I'm in agreement with him, but again, this is like me telling you that ecological dynamics is incorrect. I'm going up against like a plethora of more information than I actually have available to me. So, but yeah, so representativeness, where does it stop? Where does it start? I suppose, as a very broad brush stroke, but in jiu-jitsu in particular, people have brought in props, for example. I'm not a fan of them. What's your thoughts on props in an environment such as grappling?
Well, I think it comes back to what are we trying to make real? So ultimately, representative learning design came about from trying to simulate what we need to perform under, what are all of the things that contribute to the performance environment, and how do we actually expose ourselves to them in better and more thoughtful ways at training so we are ready for game day. So what needs to be real is usually the question that I ask first. The theory talks about the functionality and action fidelity. Those were the two criteria that Ross Binder introduced as like filters to understand whether or not we're creating something representative. Functionality is, are we actually solving the problem we need to solve when we are, on game day or in a fight? And action fidelity, are we moving in realistic ways that will allow us to solve real problems? So real problems and moving in realistic ways to solve real problems. That's kind of the original filter of what representative learning design is. So then you can overlay that on any training session that you've ever done. Props, bringing something that is external to what the competition demands, what the end goal is, can make it an unrealistic problem, but you could still be moving in realistic ways. So when we hit a barrier, so what we would call like a rate limiter within like the constraints-led approach, if there is a point in time where we are plateauing with our learning and we do not know why, we often feel like it's impossible to overcome. Stepping back out of that space and creating different ways to either solve different problems or to move in different ways can then help us almost get around that barrier that we feel like we're hitting. So if I'm moving in a dysfunctional way and solving the problem, right? But I mean, we had an example of this the other morning. Okay, if you hide your hands during this particular activity, the opposition wins. And you're like, okay, but me hiding my hands is safer than any other option I've got. So I don't like losing that game did not become important in that moment. Hiding the hands was the easiest way to solve the problem. Even though there was a consequence, there wasn't a real consequence necessarily. I lost the game, but I'm still in a relatively safe position as a human being in this like activity right now. That creates opportunities for moving differently. And it is moving in a realistic way, but it wasn't a realistic problem in that the connection to why that would not be useful wasn't there yet. It was there in the next version of it, but it wasn't there yet. So the realistic problem in that sense for that, 5 minutes of an activity, it wasn't there. So then the action became available. It was an unrealistic action because we didn't have a realistic problem for that action.
Hey, we're not here to criticize my games, all right? I'm joking. No, I'm joking.
I contextualize it and everything. The point being, you responded to that, right? And there are going to be moments where we are dealing with so many different actions happening at the same time. There's so many problems that are available to us in a sport like jiu-jitsu. And the shift between which one we are working on is like a split second. And you don't even know it's a split second as a white belt when you get led into this perfect trap that Levi has set that you didn't even know was there. Not bitter about it at all. You're like, I'm out. I'm dead. It's a slippery slope, man. Okay, like you're never out. So, like being able to then shift, like I feel like, especially coaching something like jiu-jitsu, where the barriers between what is a real problem and what is a real action shifts the second that someone interacts with another human being like we're supposed to is very, very difficult to manage. So we don't try and manage it. We just try and make it as close as possible to either like one side or the other. We're either moving in realistic ways or even unrealistic ways to feel the differences between them. And then we're creating these realistic problems where there are consequences for moving in particular ways that are going to get you in trouble or experience success in a genuine training, like in a genuine performance environment. So I feel like there's what we call like representative learning design. They're almost like two spectrums happening at the same time. And being at the low end of one does not make it wrong. It just means we're using it for a particular reason or not. If you're at the low end intentionally, I have no beef with that ever, because you are at least targeting something. But if you're on the low end because you didn't know, that's unfortunate, because the more curious you are about your practice, the less time you'll probably spend in those spaces unintentionally. You might use them with intention to target something specific. But being unrepresentative or low representativeness, I would never really call it unrepresentative. Low representativeness has its uses if we use it well, and we use it within a context that is real.
Is that what people would call like low fidelity?
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the props can be used well. Like, to answer like the original sort of second question, like, why would you use the props? Because if they are to target a version of moving, like an action fidelity that you haven't been able to find with the realistic problem setting or the battle zones that we create, then bringing people out of that space and into almost like exploratory, fun, different space to then find those realistic ways of moving can then still transfer back once we bring it back, especially if we've hit a ceiling and we can't solve that problem in context.
Okay.
Yeah, we're widening our horizons of what we can do to eventually bring it back to a real context. It's never going to be wrong necessarily. It just has to be connected to something.
Right. Okay. That's given me something to think about. So the idea of nested affordances, that would also that would indicate then there's like a high fidelity or high functionality. Anyway, don't worry about that. But like the idea of nested affordances that you can only do something if something else happens, that's about right. Yeah, it's like
at a basic level. Yeah. They're all connected, right? Yeah.
It's all connected. So so how does that fit in with I suppose the fidelity aspect? Like, yeah.
So it helps to keep action in it as well, because we are talking about action fidelity. When we're looking at nested affordances, the reason why it becomes important to keep the connection between options is because our action will then create the next affordance and vice versa. So like me being in a particular position is going to afford particular ways of moving in the next way. It's also going to allow for things not to happen based on the way I'm interacting. So the fact that I am, as you say, spaghetti, and it's very difficult to actually get into a position where you can use an arm submission, especially around the elbow, that in itself then creates different ways forward. If you can't use this, then you're going to have to go somewhere else. So the ability to get to that position and then also go somewhere else is a nested affordance, right? But that's not working for everybody. So there's still action fidelity with nested affordances, because that's probably closer to the competition context that we're working with. But it doesn't mean we can't have high quality action fidelity without it, or when we constrain it. The idea being there should still probably be some realistic options out. So me getting to a position that affords something else, because I can't really get there without that position to begin with. When we isolate those moments, when we actually spend a bit more time with them, we probably make it less representative for the sake of actually getting exposure without having to worry about the billion other things that could happen right now. And so almost taking out like one or two affordances and then looking at them more closely and then returning them back to the deep nestedness of which they normally exist in is a really great way to be like, okay, so here's the thing. It might happen once in a 4-minute roll, but at least you know what it feels like, looks like, and what you think in that moment. So you have an opportunity to respond more effectively. If you only ever saw it once every 4 minutes, well, once in a night, usually if it's at the end in a roll, then how would you get better at it if you didn't have more exposure with it? So we walk that line very often when we, grill something as how do I keep it together enough that you get to experience it and have more time to understand it and play with it, while also not making it so far away from what you would usually experience that you don't even notice when it happens.
So that those end stage, like virtually end stage submissions, for example, and then sort of expanding back out. I think I played a little bit with being expanded and then moving in, and it definitely didn't have the same the same kind of, well, it was good for me, but like as in identifying that wasn't probably the best way to do it, and then asking everyone, which one felt better. They were like, yeah, when it was end stage, and then moved out. So that's pretty cool.
Do you know why it works? Do you remember what they said when, like, why they preferred the end stage back out, so vice versa?
No, I can't remember. Tell me.
One of the cool parts was you could work out, I guess, the moments that work to just like block something, and then you had to be like, okay, if you have a way to get into this position and I know where we're going with this, then I can figure out other ways to contain that, so we don't even get to the end stage in the first place, so that when we're back into the most open version of it, we actually know when something is being set up, because we understand what getting out of that position looks like and where I need to be to like protect myself. So being in like a chokehold, a triangle, for example, and knowing that, okay, if I can create a little bit of space on this side, or I can actually leverage my own legs to create space, or if I do this at the wrong time, I make it worse for myself. Like, you find out very quickly what the extent of your survival looks like, and then you can weasel your way out of it, so that when you feel somebody setting up for it, you're like, all I need to do is just actually like keep a bit of gap here, and then I'll be fine. Even if they actually get into somewhat of the position they're looking for, I'll be okay, because they'll never be able to close it if I maintain space here. And like working backwards from that makes it so much easier to then feel what actually stops them from that end stage. How much of a little annoying piece of shit do I need to be to make sure that you don't get what you want, but I also safely get out and potentially set up the next thing? So like, yeah, it was almost like, okay, this is how I stop you from doing it. This is how I get out. This is how I never get into that position in the first place. So like, that progression then becomes a lot easier to come back to when you're in the middle of an open space where anything's possible, because you can feel that progression happening because you've worked your way out of it.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's exactly what I'd want from that game. So that kind of brings me to another sort of objection, let's call it. It's not really an objection. It's just something that I think CLA coaches grapple with, and I know I've heard it across the board, but like saying things like, I want to let my students do a little bit of drilling just to feel it. Now, for me, I'm like, well, why wouldn't you just put them in the end stage and let them feel it for all those reasons we've just discussed? And so, not putting on anyone on blast, but the thing that always kind of the underlying theme is safety. So, but then I wonder, a lot of it's like end stage, that if they're worried about safety, it's end stage technique, right? Specific technique. So I don't think we are working towards technique, like a specific technique. We are working towards a problem solving. Right. So if you are end staging a technique, you're probably not allowing them to problem solve. You are trying to force a technique to emerge.
Can you give me an example of what, because like obviously we haven't spent a lot of time isolating technique in my experiences at the gym. Can you give me an example of what a technique focused version of that would look like?
Yeah. So if we said, let's just say an armbar, right? So we're on top, and you've even, you know how we've played the games where their arms are locked, right?
Yeah.
Now it would be literally the arms are pretty much gone, and you haven't got this arm, and so it's just you're fighting someone holding their bicep. I'm just showing off my bicep here, but all you're doing is you're fighting someone with your bicep.
Okay.
And they're trying to straighten you out in an armbar. That's how I would see that. Like, and then it's like, well, safety. I want them to feel where their arm is sore. Like another example would be a takedown. Primarily a takedown. I think this is where the biggest question arises around it, where. Because it's like, I want to see them do XYZ takedown. And because it's such a dynamic takedown, then, we want to show the technique first in order for them to do it slowly and safely. And I'm just like, that doesn't make it, in the context of ecological dynamics, it doesn't make sense to me. And so I'm wondering if maybe you could steel me in that argument. Again, I'm not having a go at anyone, but I still don't understand the safety aspect of it if we are looking for problem solving from any position.
Well, I think like that's the fundamental difference. Like if you're isolating a technique because you want people to experience it in its whole without any contest, then the problem solving isn't necessarily maybe the end game for somebody who believes that technique is important in isolation. But the want to go back to it, to the certainty of it, means that we're just trying to find a coordination pattern that actually gets the outcome. But that's not going to be available to you the second that person starts putting up any kind of resistance or movement or awareness of what is going on, right? So, I mean, if it's a couple of minutes as a primer, almost like we see it all the time, like throwing sports and stuff as well, the idea of like warming up the throw. Like personally, I don't think we actually need to warm up the throw. It's more of a like just a warm blanket that we're not quite ready to let go of yet, because either we don't trust that the thing that we're doing is wholly connected to our goals, or because we just want to feel good about ourselves. And frankly, like who doesn't want to feel good about themselves for 5 minutes? So like the technique element of it, the isolation of something like a takedown. I mean, for people who don't fall often, who don't know how to receive a takedown safely, I can imagine it's a pretty good space to learn how to fall. And then to know what it feels like when you're going over, so don't fight it in a way that makes it worse for yourself. Don't twist and turn and, like land on your own arms, for instance. Like I often get my arms trapped under when I'm moving people because I don't think ahead of where I'm moving them to. Like, of course, if we're rolling right, your right arm is right there. So like the exposure of that can be useful. But again, what is it for? Is it actually for a technique so that you know what it feels like? Or is it actually just so you feel a bit more comfortable with doing it? So the first time you're doing it isn't necessarily against somebody who is fighting you for it. If it's 5 minutes, who cares? If it's 30 minutes of doing that, then I'd start to beg the question of, do you really think this technique, as it is in isolation, is exactly what they're going to need as their coordination pattern in a more realistic context? And chances are it's not. It's maybe at most 50% of the potential solution. You're going to have to like adapt it anyway. So how much time do you really want to spend doing the rest of the work to make it a skill? Like most things, it fundamentally comes down to how you define what we're doing. If technique is a coordination pattern and skill is the application of it for functional and beneficial outcome, then like very distinctly, I would spend very little time here in isolation. So I'll say that again more slowly. Technique as a coordination pattern. Skill is the functional and beneficial application of that coordination pattern. Functional solves the problem, beneficial is a performance advantage. So I might be able to get out of a particular position, but if I put myself in danger as a result of that, it might be functional, but it's not beneficial, which is the epitome of my career at the moment in martial arts. It's functional, but it made it worse. Congratulations. You're just gonna have to find out at the next thing. But if you think that
in your defense, you are in a room of like higher level guys that have been doing it for a long while, so
it's very entertaining for everyone involved. But if you think that technique, it can just be dropped back in to a skill context, you do enough technique that it gets good enough and robust enough that it is the skill, then that's an entirely different way of thinking about it.
And I think that's where the traditional method kind of has the idea this is how you develop skill, whereas the reality is it's probably in the 20 minutes that they're doing open mat at the end, and that's why it takes them so long. Overall, just throwing a few jabs in while I'm here. So
I think you're trying to build up something, and like you can still do 1,000 reps of something and it not work. And you could also do 10 reps of something and it works, right? Like I wish there was a function that we could use that would tell us exactly how many times we need to do something before we can use it. But the point is, there are some spaces that believe you have to have this before you can use it, and others where using it is the development of technique in the first place. And so if you make that distinction, you'll completely train in different ways as a result of that. It's not to say that like one works better than the other. It's to say, are the practices you're using aligned to what you think technique and skill is? Because sometimes we don't align them and then we blame it on the wrong thing. Maybe it was the definition that didn't connect to the practice. Maybe the practice doesn't understand what your definition of it is. So you're asking people to do things that you can't even define yet because you've never sat down to think about it. Like it's the misalignment. It's not which one.
So with something like a good example would be pad work, bag work in striking arts. I see them now, based on my understandings, as more like conditioning. I'm trying to condition my body to be able to do these things, not necessarily in response to, but not have the fatigue that were we to go several rounds. And I'm not saying I could go several rounds into striking art, but grappling wise, definitely. But having pad work, that what would you think about someone getting, say, a grappling dummy and then just bashing out a whole heap of things that may help them conditioning, as in like flexibility, particular movements, that sort of thing, or would it just be worth going down to your local yoga studio and doing some yoga?
I mean, it will completely depend on the capability and the capacity that you're looking for. So in the more sort of later phases of strength and conditioning, seeing this distinction between like, do you have the engine to do it? Do you actually have the gears to do it too? So building up the engine and your general level of capacity, what you are capable of in terms of the stamina, the flexibility, etc. Just the things that allow your body to actually action the things you want it to be able to do can be built up to a certain extent, but you can't over condition something to then use it for a particular reason. So just because you can actually do 300 punches on a bag does not mean you will land 300 punches. And nobody's saying that's the reason why they're punching the bag 300 times. They're doing it so that when I have to do it 10 times back to back and I've created the opportunity to, and I got 300 in the tank. 10's nothing. And I could do 10 at the end of like copying 300 because I know what it feels like to be 300 deep on a bag and then be able to still respond in that moment. So the difference between when do I use it, how do I use it, and do I use it effectively versus can I physically throw that punch are deeply connected, but you can't overcompensate for one or the other. You can't build up a tank to then magically punch someone in the face if they got their guard up. You're not going to punch them in the face regardless. So you have to solve that problem too. The question about the grappling dummy is kind of similar to free throws of basketball, right? Like you're not going to learn to shoot 3 points by standing at a free throw line and sinking 100 of those.
Yeah.
But it also doesn't mean standing at the 3-point line and taking 100 shots uncontested is going to be the perfect opportunity to then sink more baskets in a game, because there are way more conditions that, you know, affect your shooting in those moments. The grappling dummy might be great so that you can find your way through something or to get into position, but chances are whatever you've learned on the dummy isn't going to necessarily transfer to fighting a real human being. It might help you recognize when you've done it though. So if you can actually get into a point, like I was struggling to understand, you know, the positioning of, you know, legs behind the back in a triangle. If I have an opportunity and there's nobody else available and the only thing I've got is a grappling dummy, then sure, finding that position again and then finding my way into it might help me notice the chance to do it the next time I fight someone. But I still have to take that opportunity in a different context for it to work.
Yeah,
like,
transferability. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah, cool. A bit of a question. You mentioned before, like we haven't really in our classes talked about technique as such. Do you think there is benefit? So I'll preface this by saying, you know, I've been watching a whole heap of my early stuff. You know, when the band was just forming. But no, like looking at when I was firstly listening to, you know, all the new podcasts and everything, like 2 and a bit years ago now, and I started thinking, oh well, I like the language of Greg Souders and that sort of thing, where it's like it's very much function based. So chest to chest pin, you know, chest to back, that kind of language. But what I have discovered and sort of seen since is a need for that mutual language. Mutual language for across submission grappling. One of the things that turned me away from it initially was there's nomenclature that's different between schools, let alone you know, a commonly accepted thing. But then, you know, there's commonly accepted things like mount, you know, side control, these kinds of things. So where does mutually or commonly accepted nomenclature kind of sit with your experience, and would you like to see more of it, I suppose?
I mean, in the sense of knowing the names of the things that we're working on, no. And that's maybe a personal thing, right? Like I don't care what it's called.
Yeah.
I'm so sorry. Like when people are talking about like, and I find it hilarious, someone will be like, oh, did you watch this thing? No, I didn't. I actually wouldn't even know where to find it if I had to be fair. Or they're talking about specific, like, you know, takedowns they want to do or submissions. I'm like, oh, is that the part where you like move the arm like this? Like, I don't know what it's called. I don't know what any of them are called to this point. I'll probably call the wrong thing an arm bar just because it's on the arm. And like,
I'm starting to forget things.
Yeah, well, that's because of the lack of oxygen to the brain. But too often for what a human is supposed to be experiencing in a normal life. But I think the shared language only exists for shared understanding.
Yeah.
So in my spaces, while I do think there are some words and some things that need to be challenged and questioned in language because the depth of it is too deep to then rewrite what that word means to us. Constraints being a really interesting one, right? Like, do I even talk about constraints with a coach? Is it even worth using that word in the first place? I'm toying around with that idea now because if I do use it, do I risk putting them off so far from what they think they already know by calling it something that seems technical but is really not when you dig into it? Going to make shared understanding harder. Or is it going to make it easier because now they have something to pin it on? Oh, so that thing that I changed when I took that defender out of that drill, that was a constraint. Yes. So whether or not a defender is there is probably going to change the behavior of what's happening in that activity. So that is something that we can change. But why did we change it? Do I need to have the word constraint to have that conversation? Maybe, maybe not. Usually you don't find out until you get the wrong answer. And the look on their face when they're like, don't ever say that again. But the point is that like the shared understanding is the point of the shared language. So if we cannot get to a point where we have shared understanding of what we're trying to achieve here, then maybe having shared language as the vehicle for connection is really useful. Maybe it's not, though. Like maybe the shared understanding can come without necessarily using the shared language, especially if that language is technical or jargon based in a way that does not resonate with the person that you're interacting with. And that's okay. I feel like most people probably have an intuitive understanding of a lot of these theoretical frameworks across the board. It just, they didn't know it was connected to something. So do we need to know that connection exists? Probably, because then you can make more effective decisions on what to do next based on how you think the world works. But do we need to know what it's called? I don't know. I think the jury's still out on that one. I would only use it if it strengthens a connection with the person I'm working with.
Cool. Yeah, that is pretty much in alignment. I think there's certain things I don't really care to label anymore. It's like it's pure function. Like that's. I mean, we've been doing submission months, but you know, I think most people are just discovering that control is the name of the game, and they always do, and it's always, you know, and there's like 1,000 different versions of the submission that it's like, yeah, but the function is you're just hyperextending someone's arm. So yeah, choking someone. Well, I think we've been talking for about an hour now. I mean, I'm keen to do this again and do it in the future, but I know you've got stuff to do as well. So I've got so is this the right one? Damn it. Would you okay, so this is an experiencing from your perspective as an academic. What's been your experience in submission grappling, and what would you see more of, and what would you want to see less of?
I think, well, like most things, it'll be deeply personal. Right? So this is the first time I've done a sport that is contingent on explicitly manipulating other people into positions. And like that has been such a fascinating experience purely because the lines of what makes an attacker, what makes a defender are very, very blurred. And like we can see it all the time in like team sports, and that, you know, like good defense is often, you know, the setup for good offense and vice versa. But when offense and defense is whether or not your life is at threat, it's a very different circumstance. So I would say like I specifically chose this gym, because I don't think I could actually experience a traditional style of like martial arts instruction and genuinely enjoy myself because it's not how it resonates as a learner for me. I quite enjoy being coached in the ways that I coach, There is a reason why I was a pain in the ass athlete growing up, because most of the coaching styles that I was looking for weren't available to me at the time. Through no fault of their own, it just did not vibe. And so being able to then find a space that I knew was closer to the learning experience that I was looking for, then made it so much easier to jump in like wholeheartedly into this very uncomfortable space that I know absolutely nothing about. I had every intention of going in like anonymously as well, but then Googled me, and that was over very quickly.
I didn't Google you.
But
That
no, it
was
was you, Alex.
that was Alex. Alex was like, yeah, she's she's a sports scientist, and I was like, oh, that's cool. Like, just not really sort of thinking about it, and then fortunately it was like 2 lessons in, and then I was like, she seems to actually be a lot more up to date with this stuff than okay. I better. Oh crap! Yeah, okay. She's deep in it. Oh God, no! I've been coaching. Yeah. I've been coaching in front of her.
That's exactly what I didn't do. But that's
she
the
had
kind
a
of funny part.
clipboard outside. Oh my God!
I'm taking notes.
7 out of 10. What for?
Yeah, I'm just gonna hold up like scorecards.
Yeah.
No, it is so interesting though, because I remember early on someone was like, "Oh, you're like a purple belt brain and a white belt body."
That's true. I do remember. I can't remember exactly what it was, but it was something regarding that defense and offense.
Yeah.
And you said something, and Levi had been away for the lesson before, and so he hadn't, and he came in at the time like the intro period, and so you just said this thing about it's very similar to what you said then, and I looked at his face, and he just went like. Yeah, and you could just see it in him, like she's nailing stuff from like that took me 10 years to get down. and it's true though. It literally is some of the stuff you were still coming out with. It's like, yeah, Jesus, took me fucking 10 years to get to that point.
I think
Which is really disheartening. Like when I think of the decades that I've put into this.
Hey, well, PhD is not an experience I would recommend to anyone.
But yeah, no, it is good though. Like it's good to one thing that I really like is that I can see skill happening quicker. So what the blue belts of today, and we expect this, but I feel like there's just going to be a rapid expansion of skill sets, especially as more people, and I know more people are taking this on. So that's part of the reason why I want to do these kind of conversations. I'm semi OG in in this space when it comes to grappling, and it's like if I can give some info for people that are just starting out, so that they're still going to make a ton of the mistakes that I made, but that they feel okay about it. Like that, that I think one of the best things was I was going in, head first and just like, all right, I'm learning this and I'm putting it into play. And then, watching some of the stuff back, I'm just like, oh man, I've completely shifted my thought process. I mean, some of the arguments that I'm sort of, debating now and going, no, that's like the biggest one is, it's better for purple belts and above, because they already have a framework within which to work. And now I'm like, it's good for everyone. Like, it's good for everyone. And I was saying this early on in the piece. So what would you want to see more of, and what would you want to see less of?
I mean, I haven't really thought about it because I quite enjoy just being a participant in those spaces. I think to see more of will probably just be around like it'd be so interesting without debriefs, because like I purely because I think the pressure to verbalize something that is very difficult to verbalize can sometimes interrupt like the learning process. And so you kind of see people halt a little bit when, you know, we kind of sit at the end, and then we talk about it. Being able to talk about it isn't necessarily a metric of understanding it necessarily. Like, not being able to speak about it doesn't mean they didn't get it, because just converting the thing that we've experienced back into language can be really difficult. Like, we can know something's happened, but then not be able to tell someone else yet. And so I wouldn't say it's like no debriefs. I feel like maybe only one or two people speaking instead of everybody, just like taking the pressure off needing to say something or feeling like they need to say something. I don't think it's ever intentional to be like, everyone must say something. It's more like, I want everyone to feel heard. You know, like, yeah, the intention is there. And yeah, it just, even what happens when we don't talk about it intentionally, like as a learning tool, be super curious. Yeah, I haven't really thought about it, to be honest. Like, it's not something
that's
that's
cool.
so.
I am interested in that as well. Sometimes there's parts where I'm like, but it helps. It has helped me understand where people are, where people are getting snagged as well. Because especially when I'm partaking, because I can't, like, when I'm not partaking, I feel like I can, and then I turn around and I go, am I working them too hard because I'm not giving them the debriefs? And it's only because I'm sitting off on the side and I'm like, yeah, I'm not feeling, I'm not feeling out of breath and needing to sit down for 30 extra seconds.
You can usually tell by how quickly or how slowly they get up.
yeah. So yeah, okay. Well, that's cool. And that was actually, like, as I was asking the question, I was like, I wonder what Alex thinks about the insights. Yeah, cool. Well, I think. Well, how about I'll run a bit of an experiment. I mean, that's partially what I'm looking to do this year again. Is experiment, write down do what I did in the first the first year, where I was writing down, the what worked, what didn't, but then, like, what was my intention, from the original constraints-led approach, Ian Renshaw book. So I'm thinking of pulling that back out and doing all those again. It's a lot of work, but I'm willing to do it for you guys. All right.
It was my commitment. You can never say it was my commitment.
No, it's been super cool being able to have this chat, and yeah, I'd love to do it again. We not super regular, but I would, because I know you're a busy person and I'm I'm literally on leave at the moment, and this is the only time I've been able to have like a nice quiet time to actually sit down and have the chat, because otherwise it's like mayhem. So, and I'm sure the same for you.
Pretty much, yeah. It's not much different to be there. From training session to training session, and all the admin that goes in between. Yes.
So you got volleyball on this Arvo, and
I do. Yes. I don't know whose idea it was to play more sport, while working in sport, but here we are. Yes. Yeah, volleyball this evening.
Jiu-jitsu tomorrow morning.
Yeah. Well, we'll see. Actually, I have a workshop at 5 a.m. tomorrow morning. I know. So hopefully coming Friday. But yes.
So what? They're all coming to the gym, are they?
Nah, it's based in the UK. Typical.
Okay.
I technically have a meeting at midnight tonight because I never changed the goddamn hours. So I'm like, no, I'm not. No.
Yeah. That's fun. Well, I'm actually off this week anyway, so I'll see you next week in the gym. Bright and early, 6 a.m. Yeah. Yeah. Yes. Awesome. Well, is there anything else you wanted to share with my many followers, my 232 followers? I'll send them in your blog's direction, because your blog has been praised by many people. So in the space. So
Wow.
yeah.
My
So
ramblings.
there's a little bit of people out there going, "Oh, she's awesome. She's the GOAT." And I was like, "Oh, okay,
I
sweet."
literally named the last one a consortium of crabs and wrote about my social beach volleyball team. Like, why did you read this shit?
I have to say, I've read quite a few. I won't say all, but I've read quite a few, and you do have an engaging writing style, which is really, really cool. Because sometimes with the information that we have, it can be very dry. Dynamics of skill acquisition.
Okay.
Textbooks
and textbooks.
Textbooks. I'm not having a go.
I actually did a 2-part series on representative learning design. So I'll send those two might be the perfect like entry point to the newsletter, actually, if you wanted to link those. Where I do explain like how I explain it to coaches and then what it looks like in context. So that might be a cool place to start.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. That'd be sick. Well, cool. I'll let you go. Thanks very much for this, and looking forward to training with you either next week or when I see you next.
I'll do my best. It's not from a lack of trying.
Awesome. Thanks, Alex. See you soon. Bye.